Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. You can also check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. There you'll see write-ups on films and TV shows that I've watched for the first time, as well as other items such as, in this particular case, reviews of the short film blocks that I saw at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival. That is patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. I hope you check it out. Before we get to the meat and potatoes of this particular podcast, which is a summary of the Sundance Film Festival 2021 edition, I wanted to share an interview with you about the first film that I officially saw at the film festival, for the film festival. It is Julian Doan's short film Raspberry, and I had a chance to talk to Julian on the opening day of the film festival about the movie, and I hope you enjoy that conversation. What was the inspiration behind the movie?
It was inspired by, well, first, I went through that pretty much. My dad passed away a few years ago from brain cancer, and he came home to hospice, and we sort of we had him dying in a bed essentially for 2 weeks. And I think like when you kind of like go through that prolonged period of like watching someone die slowly, it's like it's like all the drama of all of that gets so spread out, so there's just a lot of kind of just banality in between that, right? So, and it was like that stuff was so surreal to me, and like there was a lot of awkwardness in dealing with it. There's things like do we want to take a picture of him after he died? Like, I feel like that maybe I should. It's like the last photo I probably will ever have of him, but like, do I want that photo of him? I did, but at some level I felt strange about it. Also, like, why do I feel strange about that? Why can't we do that? Probably being raised in a Western society that has like a certain relationship with death. So I think, going through that inspired a lot of like the kind of tone of this and the interest of like all of that, as well as like just being like, oh, like we have to say goodbye now. And I feel like anything I come up with is going to sound either too flowery or like kind of stupid. I don't know. It's like, like what do you say? Yeah.
No. And I one of the things that really spoke to me about the movie, I actually was thinking about my my father's death as well. He passed away about 7 years ago. He was having heart problems, and it was one of those things where it's like his last weekend. We were basically, they were trying to help him, and then it finally got to the point where there was really nothing that they could do to help him, and it was funny just sitting there, and I was there, my mother was there, my now wife was there, and some friends of ours, and we were just talking, we were enjoying each other's company, and we were just appreciating times that we spent with him. And it was funny, and one of the things that I talked about in my review is that there was actually a point where something turned out not quite what we expected it to be, and it left us not feeling somber, not feeling depressed about it, but just it hit the right note as far as us being able to leave with a smile on our face. And it was like one of those things where, death, people just respond to death differently. And that's one of the things that I think is so beautiful about this. It's such a simple story. And it's like, what do you want your last moments to be with a loved one? And it's sometimes funny the way that works out for certain people.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful, man. I think I think what's kind of cool is like people kind of watch it and then immediately they sort of go to whatever their own thing is. You know,
Hmm.
I'm sort of like so open to that. I think that's wonderful, and it's like feels so I don't know, it feels so human to then hear stories like what you went through and be like, oh, we all kind of go through that.
What was one of the biggest challenges for you to try to reflect something that was so personal to you in real life on the screen without it being maudlin or melodramatic or just very sappy sentimental?
Um, you know, I don't know for me that the straying away from those things was too much of a challenge because I sort of knew that like the experience I felt watching, um, kind of watching my dad die felt so kind of like flat in a
Mm,
way. It was so like anticlimactic. So in my head, it's like I kind of just pictured it like there's no, there's no music, there's no like harps playing, there's no violin, there's nothing, none of that happened in real
mm,
life. So I think like a lot of that was just going to be in the film. It's like, and I love like a lot of like minimalist like European filmmakers. I'm so moved by like the frankness, like Michael Haneke's work mostly. So I think I kind of wanted to, sort of portray that. But I think certainly there was a challenge in trying to calibrate like the emotional aspect of it and some of the comedy.
mm-hmm.
And the approach to comedy is never, you know, we were never to think about any of this as comedic.
Yeah.
Everything that's happening is just happening in the reality of this situation. And we'll just like lean on the fact that it's like that there's a juxtaposition of what's happening versus what should people feel it should be, and that will
Mm-hmm.
be the humor. And honestly, like a lot of the just in terms of the tone of the acting and the maudlin, staying away from being maudlin and kind of saccharine and stuff, like it just sort of those actors are just Ray and Joe and Alexis and Jihi and Harry, Molly, Matt. They're all just like so attuned and so intuitive. And I really just I think just we talked about death, we talked about loss with the actors, and like they just kind of got it. Like to be very honest. So I think I think they kind of knew. I think they kind of knew intuitively like where this was going to sit.
Yeah, and I think it is about finding that tone, and it is about finding that moment where it's like you can have humor, but it's like you're not overemphasizing the humor for effect. You're just letting the humor go. Like when they're bringing the stretcher in, and it sort of it sort of catches itself on the sliding door, and it's just one of those things where it's like, of course this is going to happen at this point, but at the same time it just
Yeah.
goes it just goes at a point, and then the fact that they're so the people taking away the body, they don't really react to any of the things that they're being told, because they're familiar that they're seeing. They're just familiar with they probably are of the feeling that they've basically seen every type of reaction to death, and
Exactly.
regardless
Right.
of what it is. And yeah, being able to capture that tone is just really real was really really gratifying to see.
Thank you. Yeah.
What is this the first festival that it's played at?
This is the premiere of Raspberry. Yeah, it's premiering here at Sundance. Yeah, it's a wonderful premiere to have. We're so like it's so I mean it was so unexpected for us. I wanted to make something good. And I wanted to make something different than I had made in some years, and that I felt like it was a film. When we sort of finished it, I felt like it was a film I'd been like wanting to make for like my
Mm.
entire career, essentially.
Were there any particular we sort of touched on this earlier. Were there any particular challenges with making this movie?
There was a lot of I'm trying to think of like the one particular I mean, it was all films kind of have like, scheduling and budgetary challenges, of course, but we got the film up and running and like really into production like pretty fast. It was like
Mm-hmm.
from the moment we started to like shooting it, it was like 3.5 weeks. And like, we all work full-time jobs and stuff in the film industry. So it's very difficult to find time to do things like casting. Like we didn't have casting sessions. It was like, Ray's my friend. I knew we wanted to do it with Ray. He's such a talented actor, and he's got that like he's got just all the emotional weapons to sort of catch this entire breadth of emotions that this character has to go through. And we found a lot of the other castmates like through other projects that various people had worked on, and we sort of surprisingly just found like the right group to be this family.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, I will say for me, the biggest thing that drove me through the entire process, it's kind of funny to say, but it was almost like a fear. I was driven by like this fear for a lot of the time, is that I knew that the tone was that it was going to feel somewhat boring, was
Mm-hmm.
that it would feel dry and clinical. And, and I knew the main character wasn't going to say anything. So it was like, how do we do this short film that feels so dry, and a character that feels so dry and like opaque, and how do you kind of like put this together and make an audience feel not only like invested but like curious, like
Mm-hmm.
how do you pull them into that? So like that was always like a thing in the back of my head, and I was constantly trying to just like figure out ways to to interest you, but without making it so cutty, without making it so, so on the nose.
Yeah.
It
No,
was
and
finding like that middle lane.
yeah, and I think one of the reasons that succeeds so much in doing that is because of the fact that it starts about the family in general, and then as the short progresses in those 7 minutes, you start to notice you start to notice the main character more, and then you start to really linger on him more, and you do make him the main character to the point where it's like it's really his reaction to this death is what we're waiting for. And I think that's part of the reason why it it's so effective, because of the fact that it completely takes us by surprise as to what that reaction is.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm glad that works, because it was like, in terms of shot listing and I cut as well. Like, and so in terms of like sort of the grammar of the film and piecing it together, it was like every shot to me needed to like introduce some new question or
Mm-hmm.
some sort of new information, which kind of feels like it goes without saying, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes films don't do that. But this one was so like, I felt like we needed to be strategic. Like, let's see the family, then let's see the dad, let's see the fallout of the death, and then suddenly like there's this new character, and then you need to be like, who is he? And then, so we need to like kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
there needed to be like this building block sort of like experience to like watching the film, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that the character doesn't say anything is part of what makes that uh eventual, the eventual surprise so pleasantly surprising, because of the fact that it's like it just goes to one of those things where it's like sometimes you don't necessarily need to say something at all. Sometimes it's just actions that
Right.
can basically say everything you need to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But well, thank you very much for your time today. And like I said, I love the film. It was such a great way to start the festival, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the type of reaction it gets as the week goes along.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm moved by your reactions to it. So thank you. And thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. So this is I wasn't necessarily expecting Sundance to be my first film festival of the year, and it'll probably be only one of two, as I do plan on trying to cover the Atlanta Film Festival again in late April, early May. But when I found out that they were actually going to be doing satellite screenings in Atlanta at the Plaza for the Sundance Film Festival, I got intrigued about the idea of covering it for the first time. So I sent my application and was approved for covering it. And it was not how I would hope to cover Sundance for the first time. Obviously, it would be great to be able to go to Park City, Utah, and check out the atmosphere, check out the legendary theaters there where people converse over the films and see some of the big movies that get acquired out of Sundance play for the first time. And that was not on the cards this year. It was an all virtual festival because of COVID-19. But it was still really exciting to see it branch out, to try to get as many people as possible watching and taking part in the festival this year. Even though it was an all virtual festival, even though it was not to take place at Park City. And I hope that, while I do continue to hope that I will get a chance to go to the festival in person myself in the upcoming years, I did really enjoy this, and I do hope that they keep some semblance of the virtual aspect of it alive in the years to come. And I have a feeling a lot of film festivals are probably going to end up doing that, but we'll see what it's like once things start to get back to a relative normal. So I didn't go quite as hog wild with screeners before the festival like I did for Fantasia Fest, partially because there was a set schedule of screenings that I was able to get to this time, unlike Fantasia Fest, where most of the screenings were geo-blocked for me. And so I wanted to basically let the festival come to me, and it was still a pretty exhausting experience. I actually still saw I still saw seven fewer combined features and short films at Sundance in a week and a half compared to the 73 that I saw at Fantasia Fest, which I covered for over a month. So it was needless to say, it was a pretty busy week, and there are some good things and bad things. I think that are pretty evident as we continue to see virtual film festivals pop up, and I talk about that in my written blog on Sundance. This is something I wanted to devote this podcast to, talking about the films that I enjoyed the most out of Sundance, and we're going to be talking about we're going to be breaking it up into just six categories, and the first category I will say is best screenplay, and there were actually some very strong movies here, and there are some really interesting movies from a thematic and from a narrative standpoint that I'm looking forward to diving into more as they go into regular release. That's certainly going to be the case with two of these, which I have not done print reviews yet for. Third on my list for the best screenplay of the festival is Passing, Rebecca Hall's movie about two women who were high school friends in 1920s New York who meet up again, and they both could pass for either white or black at that point. And one of them is passing as black, one of them is passing as white. And there's a lot of really interesting racial dynamics at play in this movie, and the performances by Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson are really exceptional. And their performances, I'm curious to see how Netflix is going to promote this movie when it goes into release, and I'm curious to see how larger audiences in general respond to it. I'm looking forward to reviewing this movie more in depth as it goes into regular release, but I will say it really it really did kind of strike a chord for me in terms of the way it approached the issues of race in this particular time in American history, and it's one of those movies that definitely stayed with me as the festival ended. Next up is On the Count of Three, which I caught up with after it was an award winner at Sundance. And this is an interesting movie because of the fact that it's about two friends who basically make a suicide pact that at the end of this particular day they're going to kill one another, and because they don't really feel like they have anything to live for, and it's interesting to see them. It's interesting to see the perspectives change as the day goes on, and the performances by Gerard Carmichael, who I'll talk about later, and who directed the film, and Christopher Abbott just do a wonderful job of bringing these characters to life and bring these differing dynamics to life. And so On the Count of Three was my number 2 as far as the screenplays of the festival. Number 1 for me was Mass. And this movie I've already reviewed in print, but it's well worth going back and reading what I talked about when it comes to Frank Kranz's directorial debut. And you can certainly make the argument that a lot of people did that it's very wordy, that it's could be more of a stage play, but I think there's a lot to what Kranz does as a director that makes this movie so much more interesting than just something that could be seen on the stage. And you see the way that the camera's used and the way the actors in this movie, the extraordinary performances in this movie play out, and the way that it approaches the subject of the after effects of gun violence and what that does to people who both lost somebody to the violence and to the people who are related to the perpetrator of that violence. And it was a fascinating movie to watch for that very reason. And Mass it's going to be hard to top that movie for me for this year. I'm really curious to see how the rest of the year unfolds, but that was very much the best movie of the festival for me. When it comes to the best performances of the film festival, I've already mentioned some of them, and honestly, like, I could go 6 deep just talking about On the Count of Three and Mass in particular because those performances are so good. Number 3 for me is Gerard Carmichael, who's the director of On the Count of Three and the main character, and the way his character transitions in his perspective on his life and what they might be doing at the end of the day is really extraordinary to watch. And Christopher Abbott is exceptional in this movie as well, but it's particularly fascinating to watch Gerard Carmichael's character and to see him grow, to see him change throughout the film. And that's why when it comes to the performances, he was my number 3 for the festival. Number 2 is Emilia Jones for the big winner at the festival, Coda. And there's nothing particularly extraordinary about her performance, but she is playing opposite. She is supposed to play a character who's who's basically been her parents and her brother's voice over the years, and she has a choice to make when it comes to her own personal voice. And it's just a beautiful performance. It's a wonderful performance. The entire cast in this movie is exceptional as well. All three of these casts are just great, and there were plenty of others. But Amelia Jones stands out, and I think that hers is a performance that I think a lot of people can really connect with and resonate with, and so I think she's going to be somebody that breaks out pretty heavily when it comes to when Coda comes out from Apple Plus later in the year. So my number 2 performance of Sundance is Amelia Jones and Coda. Number 1, this is no surprise at all, and honestly, this could easily be a 4-way tie for me. It's Jason Isaacs in Mass, and he and Martha Plimpton play a couple who lost a child to a school shooting, and they are meeting a couple played by Reed Birney and the fantastic Ann Dowd, who they are the parents of the person who perpetrated the shooting. And seeing the way the character dynamics between these 4 play out is just extraordinary, and is a masterclass in acting opposite partners. And you see there's not a false note in any of these performances. All 4 of them are just fantastic. But Jason Isaacs is the one that stands out, and he's the one that had the most attention from the critics I talked to and communicated with throughout the festival. And it's just a beautiful performance, and it's filled with rage and empathy, and it's the movie itself is going to be one of those movies that I think people are going to be talking about, and I'm curious to see the discussions that come out of this and come out of this movie. And so the best performance I saw at Sundance, out of the best movie I saw at Sundance, and we're going to get to that, is Jason Isaacs' Mass. Next up, we're going to go ahead and say Best Narrative Features, or Best Narrative Films, I should say, because 2 of the films I'm including here are short films. And this is an interesting list, and it's funny that 2 of the short films that I saw very early on in my viewing for Sundance ended up being 2 of the best that I saw throughout the festival. And they were Raspberry, which I've already listed, as well, and you already heard me talk to Julian Doan about the film, but also Double Speak, which is about the aftermath of a woman who reports sexual harassment in the office, and basically is left to hear what the company found, and it's just such a devastating film, to an uncomfortable film to sit through, and I think it has to be, because of the fact that it's basically about how workplaces fail women or anybody who comes forward with harassment. And it's funny that I'm recording this the day after Charisma Carpenter spoke her allegations about Joss Whedon, and which after Ray Fisher and the Justice League last summer, and it's really kind of interesting to have this this be discussed at this point and watch Double Speak, which is not necessarily the same thing, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you just feel for the main character, and it's a heartbreaking 10 minutes to watch, but it is a completely fantastic experience. And so my 3 and 2 in the best narrative films list were Double Speak and Raspberry. My number one was Mass. Um, it was a no-brainer. It was the film that had the most impact on me watching it throughout the festival, and it's just one of those movies that I can't wait to see. Again, I can't wait to see what the reaction is from people when the movie does come out. For best documentary films, again, these are either features or shorts, although all 3 of these are features. Um, my the 3 best I saw at the film festival. The first one is Summer of Soul, which is Questlove's documentary about the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969, the summer of Woodstock. And I saw it's one of 2 movies I saw at the film festival twice, and it was just a wonderful experience. It's so alive with the performances, so fascinating with how the idea of how this performance got essentially got sidelined because of Woodstock, and what we see as far as what it speaks to happening in the country, and especially happening in Black America at the time in 1969. And there are just so many wonderful performances in this, and it's a movie. I hope Search Love treats it well, because it is a fantastic film. So my number 3 for best documentary films is Summer of Soul. Number 2 is Misha and the Wolves, and this is a fascinating story about a Holocaust survivor whose recollections or whose truth about the Holocaust may not necessarily be honest. And it's a very compelling look at the truth, at personal truths, and the way that myth can be blown into something that nobody can really control. And essentially, it also talks about like how we as a society can sometimes negate the experiences and insult the experiences of people who have actually gone through something like the Holocaust, if we have a personal stake in doing so. And again, it's actually kind of funny because now that I'm talking about this, we just had Gina Carano get fired from, or announced that she was not returning to The Mandalorian because of her social media comments, which includes things that a lot of people considered anti-Semitic. So it's a fascinating documentary. Netflix got. Can't wait to see people check it out, because there are some twists and turns in this movie that are just mind-blowing to watch. Which brings us to number 1 as far as best documentary films at the Sundance Film Festival, and it had to be Flea, which is the story of an Afghan boy who, along with his family, had to get out of Afghanistan in the 1980s because of what was going on there at the time. And it's done a lot in animation, and it is just a remarkable telling of this story. And it's one of the most emotional experiences at the film festival. And Neon has this one, and I can't wait for people to see it. this is one that I'm going to be digging deeper into. I didn't write an actual review of it because of the fact that it was one that I caught at a second screening. But I definitely am going to revisit this one in print form when the movie comes out. So the best documentary of Sundance that I saw was Flea, which brings me to the final two categories that I wanted to cover here, and they're essentially the favorites of the festival. And this is basically I picked five features and 5 short films, none of which have been talked about so far in this podcast, to highlight because of the fact that I wanted to give credit to as many movies as possible coming out of Sundance, and it was there were a lot of really great ones that I enjoyed watching and talking about and experiencing for the first time. And so we're going to start with my 5 favorite short films of the festival, and and keep one of these names in mind because it's going to play in at the end of the podcast. And all of these I didn't get a chance to see all of the short films at the festival, but I saw enough to know that this was actually a pretty interesting and pretty varied collection, and one that was definitely worth checking out. Setting aside Raspberry and Doublespeak, my 5 favorite short films were the festival were The Fourfold, which is an animated representation of a shamanistic ritual. The Touch of the Master's Hand, which is a comedy about a Mormon elder who is being questioned by the president of the church while he's on a mission. When We Were Bullies, which is a bit long, but is a fascinating look at a particular moment of bullying in the filmmakers' life in grade school, and how people within that class who remember that experience, how they go about remembering that experience. And it's a fascinating watch, and I'm really curious to see how people respond to it. A Concerto is a Conversation, which is a documentary where a son and a father have a discussion about the racism that the father had, and it's structured in the manner of a concerto musical piece. And my favorite short film of the festival was by far the most irreverent of the bunch. It is Ghost Dogs, which is an animated look at what happens when a new dog is basically alone in the house at night. And this is kind of a perverse one, kind of a creepy one, but it's a beautifully animated one. It's a really haunting one, and I look forward to. And if you have a chance to watch it at a film festival, I highly recommend it. It's really something you will never forget. So that brings me to my favorite feature films of the fest, setting aside Summer of Soul, Mission, The Wolves Fleet, and Mass. These 5 features that I'm going to talk about cover a lot of ground in terms of how they approach their subjects, and it's really compelling to see. And some of them don't always work, but they were experiences that I'm glad I had in this particular environment, although it would have been a trip to watch some of them in the theater. So with that being said, my 5 favorites of the fest that I'm going to put aside here are Prisoners of the Ghostland with Nicolas Cage in a post-apocalyptic Japan, or and it's a wild movie that you would expect from Nicolas Cage. It's sometimes not quite as bonkers as you hope it is, but it's Nicolas Cage, and it has him in a suit that has testicle bombs by his testicles. So that's all I kind of need to say about that. The Pink Cloud is probably the best movie you're going to see about quarantine and being isolated from humanity as you will probably expect to watch this year. It's a foreign film and is a just wonderful film about two people who go on a date and they'd never met before, but a pink cloud comes up that kills people within 10 seconds. So they have to isolate together. And seeing the way that their relationship ebbs and flows as the pink cloud remains, it's really fascinating. And I really hope I get a chance to watch this again as the year goes on, because of the fact that it's a wonderful film. And I'm curious to see any discussions it might inspire in people. So The Pink Cloud is next. Next is A Glitch in the Matrix, which you can actually watch now. It came out on the 5th of February. And it's from the director of Room 237, which I'm not a big fan of. But this is basically exploring the question of whether the world we live in is a simulation. And it's really I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this, but I think the way he approaches the subject and the turn especially it takes near the end, what made it very worthwhile to watch. And I'm glad I got a chance to watch it. Like I said, it's available now. A Glitch in the Matrix. It's worth checking out if you like documentaries that can be more speculative than like honest, serious documentaries. Which brings us to number 2, although it's not too terribly serious. It is Edgar Wright's The Sparks Brothers, and it is about the band Sparks. And this has been something he's had working on for a couple of years, and it is a great 2-hour plus documentary about the history of Sparks and their career, the ebbs and flows, the highs, the lows, told by the band itself as well as fans and collaborators over the years. And my final film of these 5 that I would consider my favorites of the fest is Sean Ellis's 8 for Silver, which was a werewolf thriller set during a cholera pandemic. And the cholera pandemic is off to the side. It's more the werewolf. It's also about the responsibility a society has when it comes to violence and what can happen if that responsibility is violated in any way, shape, or form. And I had a chance to talk to Sean Ellis. You can read my interview with him on the written conclusion of my Sundance coverage, and I hope you take a chance to look at that. And it's really just a fascinating, I love this type of genre film. It reminds you a little bit about the Hammer horror series, and it's really an entertaining thriller. So 8 for Silver is my 5th choice for my favorites of the festival. To close, I have a special treat. We began with an interview. We're going to end with an interview as well. In this case, it is an interview with writer-director Gregory Barnes, who made The Touch of the Master's Hand, which was one of the award-winning shorts at Sundance this year. And I have great pleasure talking to Gregory after the festival, and I hope you enjoy that interview. Well, first of all, congratulations on the success of the short at the Sundance Film Festival. It ended up being the last new film that I saw at Sundance, and I really enjoyed it. So congratulations on the success of it at the festival.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
What was the inspiration behind the film?
Well, growing up, I grew up in a very religious home, so I just kind of wanted to make a little movie about Mormonism and kind of I don't know if I would necessarily call them issues, but just they're pretty conservative people, so I just thought it was like a pretty funny concept to make a movie around this fairly regular practice in Mormonism where leaders ask you if if you're obedient or if you're faithful, and I thought that was kind of ripe for humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my in-laws are Mormon, so I'm familiar somewhat with the faith and their practices. So that's one of the reasons why I was curious to see the film, to see the perspective that you brought to it. And I think one of the things that I really like about it is that it is respectful of the faith while also being a bit irreverent in at least the one particular portion of the faith that you're exploring too. And not necessarily because of anything on the religious side, but on what Elder Hyde is dealing with. And I think that's one of the things that I really liked about it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think I like treating the characters as humans, and their problems are real, and not really interested in making fun of Elder Hyde per se. Yeah. Although he's definitely been persuaded he's an addict, even though what he's addicted to is quite silly. I mean, it is perceivably gentle on Mormonism. I do sexualize a baptism, which is fairly a sacred moment for them. So I don't think it's not without its ironies.
Right. Was there a particular reason behind the particular choice of the I guess I don't want to give too much away, but the addiction that Elder Hyde has, the reason for his addiction? Was there a particular reason for the choice that was made there?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a little bit of a reveal in the movie that the mission president asks him a series of questions of his worthiness, and it comes out that he feels like he has a masturbation problem. And in his interrogation, the president wants to get to the root of what that is, why he's quote unquote addicted. And so he asks him a lot of questions like, where do you masturbate? When do you masturbate? How many times a week do you masturbate? And, he asks if he's addicted to pornography, and he says, I don't know. And, the choice in the reveal of what he is addicted to, what he is specifically masturbating to, I mean, I think it's I think the movie, it's kind of hard to talk about without talking about it, but James, the movie's directed by James Cameron, and I mean that's probably enough in itself. I think he's done a particularly good job at creating visuals that are perplexingly sexual and have been ingrained in our society in one way or the other. There is a lot of side boob in that movie. There's a lot of aggressively large people in that movie, and I think it's just kind of uncanny. His attention to detail is humorous.
Yeah. What were there any particular challenges that you had in making this movie?
Yeah, I mean, we shot in a Mormon church, but to do that, we kind of had to, there were like certain limitations of where we could film, when we could film, and I wanted to film all the time everywhere. So that, meant that creatively scheduling a timetable. So, there's some holy spots like the baptism where we shot in that, I had to make sure no one was really watching us when we did it. We had permission to shoot there, but it's just not very, not encouraged for people to even videotape their own child's baptism. It's considered like a very holy place and event.
No, I remember because my wife and I got married at the ward that her parents went to, and we weren't. I remember vividly that we weren't able to take pictures inside the chapel, and so yeah, I remember.
Yes,
I know some
exactly
of
what it's in.
What was?
Yeah. So you.
Yeah. What inspired you to get into filmmaking?
Oh, when I was a kid, I watched Home Alone a little too much. I broke the VHS, so that was probably my biggest inspiration of wanting to get into the movies. My first movie was Independence Day. I made it with toys. I remade Independence Day. I didn't direct the film, but I remade it as a child with X-Men toys on a VHS. I don't know. I think it's probably some kind of illness I have, most likely.
Who are there any particular filmmakers that you take inspiration from?
I don't, no, not, I mean, I like watching movies less and less, and not, I think most recently, this last year, not too much came out because it was COVID. I saw Miranda July's Kajillionaire last Sundance, and I really enjoyed it. Did you see Miranda July's Kajillionaire?
I've not watched it yet, but I've heard excellent things about it, so I do need
it's pretty far out. It's pretty fun. I also really like Aki Kaurismäki movies. He's a Finnish director that I enjoy. I've been watching a lot of Westerns recently. I watched Oxbow Incident last night. That's great. That's a great one.
Did you happen to watch the Nicolas Cage movie? It was at Sundance this year?
Oh, dude, I'm a huge fan of Sion Sono. I'm very pissed I missed that feature. I'm very upset I wasn't able to get a ticket.
It was really enjoyable.
I bet. Don't make me too jealous. I was really heartbroken. I'm a huge fan of Sion Sono. Love Exposures is actually, that's funny you bring that up. Love Exposures, one of his past films, is a huge influence on me, for sure.
Yeah, I think you'll probably enjoy it, and it does have a lot of Western elements, which made me want to bring it up.
Cool.
So is this the first film of yours that's played at Sundance? You said you'd seen Kajillionaire there last year.
Oh yeah, I was just I produced a movie, a short film that played Slam Dance, and so I spent the last couple of years trying to sneak into Sundance parties with projects, because I was there with projects playing at Slam Dance. Love Slam Dance. They're like the first people that supported my collective of filmmakers called the American Standard Film Co. But this is my directorial debut. This is the first short I've ever directed, and the first time playing Sundance, and we won the special jury prize for short fiction, U.S. fiction, excuse me. We won the U.S. Fiction Award, so that's really cool, and that's been it's been a wild ride and a really cool experience, and so glad for the support from Sundance.
Collective, have you heard much from people who watched it at the festival and what they thought of it?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback. A lot of the people that reach out are like either ex-Mormons or people with, a background in Mormonism. I think they like saying hi, so that's nice. I got an email the other day from a guy that actually served in the same part of the world that I served my Mormon mission, which is like this a volunteer ecclesiastical service kids do with the name tags and white shirts and all that. And I went to northern Argentina. This guy hit me up. He's like maybe 20 years. He's like 20 years older than me, and he was just like, "Hey, I liked your movie, and I also like served in your same mission, and like here are the places I served, like I was like stationed, and there we had some like crossover." So that was like a cool combo.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me tonight. I'm glad we were able to make.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks so much for chatting. I super appreciate it, and big fan of the show.
Thank you, and good luck with the film as it continues to play other film festivals. That's it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema podcast. Thank you very much for sticking with me. I had some computer issues that I had to sort out before I could record this. Coming up on the podcast, we're going to be talking with a friend of mine about one of the great anime directors who is who passed about a decade ago. And we're going to have a lot of other topics to discuss as the year goes along. That's it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. And I hope you hit subscribe at the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel or whatever else you listen to podcasts. And thank you very much for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com.